Well, thank you. I hope you all found that very interesting. There was a lot of data and detail in there, and certainly there's been a number of questions coming in, which will be quite, I guess, quite interesting to put to the panel. I have one that's come in for myself, which I'll start with regards to what percentage of UK plastic waste is recycled, and what is the government long-term goal in creating a circular economy for products. Now, the circular economy is really going to shake up our world, and you've heard it mentioned in quite a number of the talks this morning. At the minute, we're only 8% circular in the world. So if you look at all the products and services that we use, in terms of the products, only 8% of what we place on the market every year is actually recovered. And similarly, you'll have heard in some of the TV programs like The Blue Planet, as commented upon by Philip, that 8 million tons of plastic waste escapes to the sea every year. And similarly, there's something in the order of 3 times that amount that gets left on land. So there is a massive amount of materials that's escaping the system, that's effectively being discarded purposefully or by accident and is not being recovered. So the issue as we move forward into the 21st century is this massive drive towards increasing circularity, increasing the recovery of materials. And the UK government, as Philip has rightly pointed out, is one of the first governments to have actually looked at how to do that through tax systems. The figure that actually is recycled is something in the order of 46% of the plastics used domestically are recovered and recycled every year. Now, generally, we produce on average 400 kilograms of waste, recyclable or otherwise, per person per year. So that's a sizable amount of materials that are being placed on the marketplace that we're consuming and that we need to recycle better. So I'm delighted to hear some of those developments that are going on in terms of biomimicry to make sure the materials break down, that emphasis on recoverability. There's a report out today from Ellen MacArthur which showed that only 2% of the marketplace for packaging is taken up with refillable items. So there's still a long way to go, and there's still huge prospects and an opportunity here. And this has to be moved at quite some pace. So I think following on from the introduction of a plastic tax, we will see further issues, the likes of the extended producer responsibility that Margaret mentioned, whereby there is an increasing focus on the recovery of items. Now, being a professional waster, what that means is that the waste sector and resources sector is going to be increasingly an enabler in this process to allow those producers of materials to re-engage with those materials after use for recovery, for reuse, for recycling, for repurposing. And so in that regard, I think that there'll be far greater focus and emphasis in the next 5 to 10 years on managing supply chains. And that's going to be a radical departure from what we've done in the past over the last 20, 30 years, where the waste sector has largely been a repository. And once it's been discarded to us, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And that was a wonderful, wonderful slide from Philip earlier on about the throwaway society. But I'm not here to do a soapbox. Those are my initial thoughts. And now instead, I'm going to hand over my first question to Joanne or Ian with regards to what options are in development as an alternative to plastic trays, especially for baked good multi-packs. And you mentioned about meat and fish. So I'd be interested to hear on that one.
Hello. Well, if I can pick up on this, folks, good morning, everyone. If I use my design hat to make this point and cover this question, because we operate with a customer base that covers some of this sector, so they are challenges that I see and face regularly. And there's been a lot of development work in these sectors, from the initial knee-jerk rushing out there, plastic's bad, and get something to market, to the much more considered ones, as I said earlier. But so there are trays out there to replace plastics that have certain performance levels that will work with some of the products listed. But there are some that won't. And we've been covering options and seeing development from bio-based coatings and barriers right through to low film weight fossil-based barriers on them. And every one of those products has unique characteristics that has to be considered, and there is no one answer that we have found that satisfies them all. We are seeing trays for some of the bread-based ones with low weight barriers, bio-based barriers that are satisfying those needs well and functioning in market, and we currently manufacture products that's sitting in those sectors. And we also have the other extreme where there are slightly lighter weight fossil-based ones because of the performance due to shelf life, due to the ingredients that's within the product staining and the food safety element of it as well being necessary. But that's an evolving situation as new materials come to market, and they are continuously evolving because we are challenging board suppliers and mills for those materials to bring to our product base. But we've also taken different directions from just trays, and actually have in marketplace now alternatives to plastic trays, both in the meat and fish sectors, where although the performance of, let's call it plastic, was necessary, we've greatly reduced the amount and weight of that, taking it in its own right to a recyclable position, but also where we can separate those materials from raw carton board very easily, that their recycling streams is very convenient and easy for the consumer. So, and they're in the retail market at the moment, and that's another situation for us is evolving. But our own research has led us to look at from pulp molded trays to press trays to pre-erected trays. They are all evolving, looking for those materials to offer the performance required. So it is when I say a healthy position, the development is healthy because it's continuous, certainly from our point and what the products that I see coming to market. So it's an ever improving situation I think we're in, which is good news, guys.
Thank you, Ian. That's useful. I'm going to sort of springboard off the back of that and ask Margaret in relation to the whole issue about the different grades of packaging that are now appearing on the market. And, you know, classically, I suppose the question is, what happens to the bioplastics and the compostable packaging across the UK and Ireland? And is this becoming a realistic alternative to the common plastic packaging in use today?
The thing with bioplastics is it covers a huge range of different stuff. So there are plastics that come from biological sources that can be recycled along with any other plastic stream, and they would normally be collected, and they're very straightforwardly collected, so they're no issue. The problem really becomes with the biodegradable and compostable ones, and although there's a very good system in Ireland, in the other countries we're really struggling because at the moment there's no clear way for example, an anaerobic digester operator to be able to tell whether when they let their AD digestate or their fibre degrade for the next 12 weeks, the only way to know if that stuff's going to break down is to wait 12 weeks and see if you've got plastic left or not. So what generally happens is everything gets stripped out and it all gets usually burnt, depending whether it's biological in source, would break down or wouldn't break down. And that's why the development of our new label around this, which we're doing with organisations like the REA and the BBIA, is a lot more complicated than people would like to think.
Certainly it's an issue we've come across in councils quite frequently with regards to things like vegware products, to not necessarily name a particular brand, but those kind of compostable materials really cause confusion in the homeowner and the resident when you're trying to explain them about why some products are recoverable and some aren't. But I'm afraid, end with Philip, because there's quite a number of questions and there's not enough time to get through them all. This whole show is being recorded and will be available for anybody who's interested afterwards. And we will also answer any questions that have been posted to us that we haven't got a chance to answer in this Q&A session. And those will also be posted online and will be available to pick up afterwards. But Philip, as a sort of simple slam dunk question, in terms of transit packaging and transport packaging, will that be liable to the plastic tax as currently framed?
Okay. Of course, the legislation hasn't yet been developed, and the whole consultation process just ended there, as I said, in August. And that actually was one of the questions that was asked, was about transport packaging and was the government's proposal fair, and people were asked to comment on that. So I haven't seen the responses, and I don't know what the outcome of the consideration of those responses will be. But as it is framed, I'll use the terminology you used there, the term, as it is framed, yes, packaging, wrap, things holding goods in place on pallets and so on, yes, that would be liable for the tax. With an exception, of course, if it arrives, if it's an imported product, as I mentioned there, things arriving in transport packaging from overseas, there'll be no tax attracted on the import packaging that's used for transport purposes. And I mentioned crates, but wrap, etc., would be included in that too. But anything wrapped on a pallet in the UK for now would be considered liable for the tax, but that may change as a result of the consultation and the legislation for that.
Thank you, Philip. And I suppose then a sneaky second question arising from that, which I'll let you in a minute, Ron, but just in terms of, does that mean then there's a shortfall in terms of infrastructure to deal with plastic recycling for plastic film? Because there's very few plastic film recovery systems working in the UK.
Well, I'm going to use the term here that, we have to remember that the tax is just one instrument in the orchestra. There are a lot of other initiatives going on at the moment. There's the Plastic Pact. There's going to be the developing of packaging, extended producer responsibility. There's the deposit return scheme. All of these things are happening, circular economy initiatives, etc. And the tax is there with one purpose. It's designed to actually incentivize the market to develop the infrastructure, if it doesn't already exist, to bring recycled plastic, make it available to producers. Of course, it may also cause producers to look and say, well, do I actually need this packaging? Is there an alternative I can use, and so on, and therefore not attract the tax. So it's a time of change, and we just have to wait and see what happens.
Thank you, Philip. Now, Ronald, you put your hand up. So have you got something to add to this?
Yeah, question? Just to say, it was a bit like the presidential elections earlier on. I was watching the numbers creep up and up and up, and at one point with 190 odd delegates watching what was being said. And I think that demonstrates the importance, and in particular, the feeling of the NI agri-food and packaging industry based around plastics. And there's an awful lot of scientific plastic questions that people have asked today. I probably think we need to have a follow-up event. This specifically hones in on those questions and addresses some of those issues. And I think INI and CAFRE will support that.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I think that's actually a very good time to wrap up, because we are keeping to an 11:30 deadline. And from my little watch here beside me, we've just got to 11:30. As I said, thank you everybody for attending today. This show will be available for catch up. It'll be currently curated and presented, and we will address any questions we didn't get a chance to in that session. So in the meantime, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. I think it's a fascinating topic, and one that will become much more front and center as we go forward for a variety of reasons. We didn't touch upon things such as the supply of secondary materials and where they will come from to meet these kind of requirements around EPR and deposit refund schemes and taxes and stuff, but that could well be, as Ron says, as part and parcel of a follow-up session. So I'd like to thank you all again this morning, and I wish you all well for the rest of your day, and hopefully you've all found that useful. So on behalf of the organisers and myself, thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.